Well, I'll tell you guys what I told somebody the other day is that in the end, whatever creative thing that it is that you want to do, or however it is that you want to like express yourself, if it's done in a way for business or if it's done as a way of just like personal creativity, the only person that is stopping you or that can effectively stop you is yourself. Welcome to the Clueless Creatives Podcast. I'm your host, Mike Kvick, and I believe you deserve to thrive in your creative journey and that you don't have to settle and be another clueless creative doing this all alone. And that's what the Clueless Creatives is all about. It's a community banding together, eager to learn, to listen, and to live out their creative dream. We'll pull back the curtain on my personal creative journey. We chat business, mindset, and motivation, have some laughs, and together, well, we'll figure this whole thing out. I'm so glad you're listening. Let's get started.
Welcome to the Clueless Creatives Podcast, where we believe that you deserve to thrive in your creative journey. We pull back the curtain on creativity. How's that?
It's pretty good. It's pretty good. I'm impressed.
I don't remember the rest. I'm Danielle Kvick, and I am with the Clueless Creative himself, Mike Kvick, in this takeover episode. Hello, Mike.
Hello. Hello, darling.
As a creative, I don't even know where to start.
You're just jumping right into the questions.
I actually realized that I don't have the notes in front of me.
Yeah, so as Danielle said, this is a takeover episode. She's gonna be running the show. She's gonna be asking me the questions. It's gonna be really interesting because now I get to be on the receiving side of the bombardment of questions and inquiries. And yeah, I'm excited for this. This is gonna be good. It's gonna be interesting.
I think so too.
Yeah.
So, Michael, how do we know each other? Sorry, Mike. So, Mike, how do we know each other?
Little background story. Danielle doesn't actually ever call me Mike because, when we started dating, I was very much into just being called Michael.
You were never called Mike growing up.
Yeah.
Never.
I don't actually know anybody that called me just Mike. I mean, my mom called me Mikey, but that's a whole different.
And when anyone asked you, is it Mike or Michael? You're always like, it's Michael.
Yeah, and then I guess it all happened when we moved to Canada and people would ask me my name and I'd be like, oh, it's Michael. And they're like, oh, Mike, nice to meet you. I'm like, no, it's Michael. I just said that. And then eventually I just gave up along the road and I'm like, okay, I can get on board with this whole Mike train.
I still can't. At least not for me. It's weird.
Yeah. Well, cheers, my wife.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Clink.
Made some very delicious Malibu sunrises.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful.
Yeah.
Okay. So, story time.
I sent her over the notes for this episode of just like the basic structure that I follow. And with every single person that I start off with, it's like, okay, we got to establish the individual, the character and stuff like that. And so on the notes, it just says story time.
So who are you?
Who am I?
What is the essence of Mike?
The essence of Mike. Sounds like a really, really bad like cologne. The essence of Mike. Or BO, either or.
Do you want to share how we met? Have we shared how we met?
I think we've shared it, but if not, we can always just say it again. I'm totally cool sharing. I like sharing our love story.
Is it our love story?
Yeah, absolutely.
Actually, I don't know if we've shared that part, but very early into our college life, college career, I guess, I noticed that Michael was. You're ruining. You're ruining my story.
I won't mix the drink.
I realized that, okay, early into our college life, college career, I recognized that Michael was following me around at this particular conference we had to go
She's
to.
making it sound like I'm a stalker or something.
But I think it was just more like I was friendly to him. And so he's like, I'm going to hang around with these people. I don't know. But anyway,
She was nice to me.
every time I turned around, Michael was there. And I'm like, oh, hi. So anyway, It was like a whole day thing that we were gone to this conference, and every time I turned around, Michael seemed to be there, and then at the very end of the day, we got on the bus, and, I was already sitting, and Michael came, and I don't think he recognized, but he sat in the seat right in front of me for, like, the 4th time that day. It was seemingly like he had followed me and secretly sat beside me.
It was destiny, my dear.
And I look at him and I'm like, "Oh, hi." And the first thing Michael says is, "Ew, not you again."
I was so charming.
So charming. That's one of my first vivid memories.
Mm,
But somehow after that, we became friends. We had a good talk on the bus.
we had a great chat.
And
It was
then
awesome.
we were pretty much inseparable after that, even though
Yeah,
you insulted me
I'm so sorry. She's holding on to this for so many years.
so many years.
No, yeah. So we met in college, like Danielle said, and yeah, I mean, in college I didn't have that many connections or that many like friendships, and so I happily spent the majority of my time with Danielle, and that quickly developed into love.
Love.
Yes, love.
No, so cute.
Yeah. Then 3 years later, we got married, and the rest is history.
Yeah. So on this journey, we've been married for over 8 years now. What what was our lives or careers like when we first got married?
It's I love this question because it's actually like, I mean, both of us weren't. I mean, you were kind of doing what you're leading into now, but like I had nothing. I didn't really have a creative bone at that point in time. Well, I mean, I played music, but apart from I played bass guitar
Mhm.
in bands and stuff like that, and like in our school and our church and stuff like that. Um, but I mean, from a creative side from a creative side, there we go. From a creative side of photography, videography, storytelling, stuff like that, I didn't actually ever think of pursuing it as any sort of career option or anything like that. And yeah, so like I mean, we worked in care homes for that cared for clients with autism and high behaviors and medical issues and stuff like that. It was a big organization that had like a couple different like group homes and stuff like that, and then individual homes. And I mean, I absolutely loved the job. It was very stressful.
It was very challenging.
Yeah,
I learned a lot, but it was a very stressful job.
yeah. I thought I think what it really taught me in the end is just having I don't know, like a healthy perspective on life in general.
Mm,
And I mean, I had lots of like small little like scary incidences and stuff like that that had happened or stuff that was stressful, but in the end, it gave me also a lot of confidence in how to hold myself, how to communicate to other people, and yeah, just to, I mean, even when you're stressed, how to show love and how to show
yeah,
care and compassion for people.
definitely.
It's definitely a lot of fun
Mhm.
in
And
the
then
end.
yeah, really, really tough work, but also very rewarding, to see the change that could come when you help people lovingly and instill change
Yeah,
and believe in them, really.
yeah.
So after the care homes, what did you move into?
uh, we moved to like northern
Well, I
Canada.
guess we
Yeah, and
we moved to northern Canada,
yeah, it was
very
literally
north.
like middle of nowhere. But I worked security for 6 7 months or something like that.
Mhm.
And when I say that it was it's, well, maybe it's not my least favorite job, but it was second at least. It was a very uninspiring job.
Mm,
And
yeah.
like, not to shame anybody that's security guards or anything like that. It just was not like the place that I was, what I was doing, all that kind of stuff. It was not my cup of tea at all.
Yeah, and you kind of
Um,
felt like you were being a babysitter for grown adults who could
yeah.
not manage themselves.
Well, like, cause it was security out in an oil site. And when I worked at the gates and stuff like that, that was usually not much of an issue. It
Yeah,
was very straightforward. It's just like any
yeah.
like, bordering security guard type thing.
Mhm.
But then I moved into the camps where it was essentially dorm type living for anywhere between 1,000 to 4,000 people. And on any given evening, if you were working the night shift, you would be and be called because of this noise complaint or that noise complaint or these drunken people or whatever. And so it's like, and you have to be like always like on the ball with stuff. And they have very, very strict like regulations when it comes to working and blood alcohol level and stuff like that. And so then if we caught people at like about 3 o'clock in the morning and that were intoxicated walking out and about, in the space or whatever, I mean, they have every right to technically. But then we would blacklist their cards, so then they'd have to come to us in order to actually get out of the campus area, and then we'd just tell them like, okay, well, like now that you're awake, you have to go back to your dorm and wait for your manager to come or your supervisor, and you have to go do alcohol and drug test. And so like, and then they're always complaining about it. They're always, it was just a lot of unnecessary man drama.
I think for you too is you like to see the best in people, but
Yeah,
working in security, you were always on call to see the worst.
yeah,
And so that's like very demotivating. Is
yeah.
demotivating a word?
Unmotivating.
Unmotivating. I'm good with English, I promise.
Yeah, she's the one that's in her master's degree.
Oh, too much writing. Anyway, but yeah, that can be so unmotivating when you're constantly just seeing the worst side of like people, and especially when you like to believe in the best in people. That
Yeah.
was definitely not your calling.
That and yeah, and like the working hours were terrible because it was 12-hour shifts, and then the journey by bus there and back was like an hour long ish, and so like I didn't have much of a life.
And you
So
were getting constantly
yeah,
sick. Like every time you'd switch to night shift, it was like your body just shut down and was like, nope.
my body and night shift do not go
You
well
had like
together.
strep throat 3 times that year.
Yeah.
But I think after that, after you realized that that was not your life calling,
Yeah.
that's when you started to step into more of a creative role and more what you're doing now. That kind of your next position sparked and fueled that. Tell me more about that.
Yeah. So I actually I worked in the school for like
Oh, yeah.
6 months after that or so. But then that was quickly put on a very prolonged hold because of a wildfire in our city. So then we evacuated. And when I came back, I ended up taking this job started off as a media director and administrative assistant in a church in the city that we lived in. And I mean, I didn't have very much experience in videography or photography specifically, or like design or stuff, but um, I mean, they deemed it that I was well enough equipped to be able to at least start something and start developing something. And they didn't have a huge setup before that or any sort of like structure necessarily in that realm of things. Yeah, and so I did that for it was just under 2 years, I think. And then by the end, I was like, you know what, I want to branch out and I want to try this whole photography thing and see what this world has to hold for me. And so I I ended up going back to work at the school. So I was only working 30 hours a week, and I'd have like the summers off and like all the basic holidays off. And then I would just work in the evening doing photography work for clients or yeah. So I started off with like concert photography. I really liked that for a long time. It's a lot of fun. It's a challenge to make it a sustainable income if you're not into the touring life, which I could do in little spurts, but at the same time, like it's also not my go to or my drive for it. So yeah, and that's really when everything my life got derailed by creativity.
So true. Because when we first met, this like was not even on the radar. Even when we first got married, like if you had told me when we first got married that you would go into like videography and like a creative, journey and start your own business in
Mhm.
this field, I'm not sure I would have believed it. So I don't think you really picked up a camera seriously to start learning how to do photography and editing probably until 2016. I think it was
Yeah,
after the fire and your brothers came to visit us. We
yeah.
went hiking and it kind of sparked your passion for photography then.
Yeah, and more than anything is like, it really piqued my interest because then figuring out the best way to document something or to show something And I mean, when I first got started, like the images are just, it's just like anybody taking any sort of like quick image with their phone or anything like that. There's no, I mean, when it comes to composition or anything like that or style or whatever, it was definitely not my best work. But yeah, it was all part of it, and I really enjoyed the process of just trying to get better at it. And I was definitely not one of those people that like picked up a camera. I was like, oh, you've got such a great eye for photography. You're so
Mm.
amazing. It's a lot of the creative stuff for me when it comes to like the hands-on creativity stuff is not something that just comes easily. And to like refine my skill to a point where I can, now consider myself a professional and at that, it took me a long time. And it was something that was, with that comes a lot of self-doubt and then, going through this whole cycle of trying to get better at it and working and watching content to try to learn and then actually just having the guts to go out and do that kind of stuff. And yeah, I mean, it took a long time.
What do you think was the turning point for you where you were at a point that you're like, "Yeah, I can see myself doing something like this as my job?" When did it go from passion to or hobby, I guess, hobby to career
Yeah.
or
I
potential
mean,
career?
when I think it was probably when I got my first paid concert shoot. Actually, maybe like I mean, the first concert that or first two that I shot were I did them for free. And I was just like, I just kind of want like a media pass and get to do some photos. And it ended up being, and that absolutely like the second one especially was just this amazing opportunity of this whole day country music festival in Fort Mac, and it was really cool because at the end I could see the end result and the quality of the images and stuff like that. I'm like, okay, like I'm actually like I'm actually competent with this. I can do this. And so that really was for me a turning point of I guess like the intrigue notch went up a little bit. And I'm like, okay, like I could learn how to do this better. I could learn how to do this more effectively. And see if I can turn this into some sort of full-time employment or even just part-time employment. But even at that, I never at that point in time I never actually really considered myself like a professional in it. It was just something that I was doing on the side. It was kind of like my side hustle. And I think it was once we moved here and I started trying to set something up here in Austria that I was like, okay, like I actually have to start explaining or describing myself as a professional in this. I can't just say I'm just doing this on the side because I'm actually like actively pursuing this as a career in life, as a profession in life. And in that, yeah, then I ended up having to be more serious to myself and being like, yeah, like if somebody asks me, oh, what do I do for work? When I first moved here, I was like, oh, well, I work part time in a ad agency in marketing, and then you know, doing like photography, videography on the side. And when I started being able to tell people, I'm like, yeah, like I'm building a business off of photography, videography, and creativity, and trying to and developing that. And then on the side, I'm working this marketing job so that I can actually afford to to live and all
Mhm.
that kind of stuff. That was really the turning point when I started actually changing my language when it came to my creative ability
Mm.
and my creative skill. She has to look at the questions.
We're at step 2. What is step 2?
Danielle always says she's like, I'm kind of envious of you speaking to me about how I can like ask the right questions to like dig deeper and stuff like that. And so when it comes to like now with the podcast, if I'm hosting it like I normally do, and I'm just like I have somebody on, it's fairly easy because I have this general structure in my head of how I kind of want things to go, and then I just ask leading questions to get towards that point. And now it's interesting just kind of sitting back and be like, let's see how Danielle does with this now.
Well, I would have kept asking questions in that direction, except for the fact that you have a little step 1, step 2, step 3 here for me, and I realize that I have deviated from your steps.
That's okay. You're forgiven. I'll still love you.
I feel like I'm kind of on the right track, though.
Yeah, absolutely.
We have established your career. We have established that you've been doing this for a long time. What would you say is your creative identity?
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to creativity and who I see myself as in all of this, in this whole world of creativity, it's more or less, yeah, helping people, and myself tell stories to make an impact in other people's lives, to encourage them and to push them into a life lived wholly, so completely, with passion and authenticity. And I mean, I think that's part of my character as an individual, as well as that's kind of what I love doing, is like encouraging people and helping people and leading people into effectively a better life, that they feel more passionate about, that they feel more hopeful in, and because in the end, like, I mean, you only have one life, and if you end up getting yourself stuck into this cyclical life of, something that you're not actually passionate about, or something that you don't actually love doing but you have to do because that's the way that you were taught or stuff like that, like, I think my drive in life in general is to help people have a different perspective and just to have a healthy perspective on, okay, what does life actually, like, what do you evaluate life to be, and what's the purpose of it all, and what's the value of it. And yeah, so when it comes to creativity, that's like, I mean, that's the essence of what I like strive towards or what I push for. Um, and in the meantime, is like, I just want to help tell stories that impact people's lives. Hence why I started this whole podcast.
So, is what we create an expression of who we are?
Absolutely. I definitely would say that that's who we are because, I mean, uh, I think as creative people, it's almost like we put our identity into what it is that we create. And that's why so many, creative people struggle with like feedback when it comes to quality of work or style of work or something like that. And I mean, you can get away a little bit from it if you, if you label what it is that you do as art, because then people understand it as an expression of who you are in that current time and place.
It's more subjective.
Yeah, exactly. Whereas if it's, creative work, for example, like photography for clients, um, it's still part of, they still have their expectations and all that kind of stuff. But you as a creative are still putting your personality and your kind of like your identity into it a little bit. And so I think, yeah, it's definitely part of who you are and part of like your expression of yourself.
Mm. What would you say to someone who is super passionate about creativity and wants to launch into something, but just feels stuck and feels like a clueless creative?
Well, I'll tell you guys what I told somebody the other day, is that in the end, whatever creative thing that it is that you want to do, or however it is that you want to like express yourself, if it's done in a way for business, or if it's done as a way of just like, personal creativity, the only person that is stopping you, or that can effectively stop you, is yourself.
Mm,
You have every capability and every possibility to create almost anything nowadays on a scale that is, achievable by pretty much everybody.
mhm.
um and so, yeah, just the only person that can possibly slow you down, or stop you from doing that kind of thing, um is yourself. And in the end, it's just convincing the person controlling the brain that you're capable, that you're able, and that you are creative. And it doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be, it doesn't have to be top notch or high quality all the time. Um, but as soon as you start the ball rolling, and as soon as you start actually like acting out on your creativity and doing stuff, you'll find more and more fulfillment and passion in just the production side of things, and like actually producing stuff and doing things, rather than feeling like, okay, like I have to do this and it has to, make me money, or it has to look a certain way or anything like that. Like, just do stuff because you love it, and not because of anything else that is, like, don't give yourself such harsh restrictions.
You speak from experience there.
Yeah, absolutely.
For quite a while there, it was like, "Oh, I need to get a paycheck. I need to make an income." And we've mentioned it in a previous episode how you just lost your passion in it because you lost sight of what it was that you love to do.
Mm,
And when you began to do more like passion projects and things you enjoy doing, even if it wasn't for money, you became more interested and more rejuvenated, I guess,
yeah,
revived in your creative passions.
yeah. And I guess in the end, like your your creativity, I think, is something that is supposed to bring you life and bring you enjoyment in life. Um, and so if you're doing your creative thing, whatever that is, and you feel like it's demotivating or it's demoralizing or you're hypercritical of yourself or anything like that, um, don't necessarily reevaluate if you should do that creative thing or not, but reevaluate how you're approaching it from your perspective and how you're evaluating what it is that you're doing. And that goes back to the whole do things because you love it. Don't have to have such harsh expectations for yourself. And I mean, like even this podcast, like I had some basic idea of like what I wanted and how I wanted it to be and all that kind of stuff. Uh, but in the end, like I also just want to focus on actually doing it. And so if that means having to be okay with the audio not being completely pristine or perfect,
Mhm.
or mm, things not flowing 100% exactly how I would want it to, or whatever else, like in the end, done is better than perfect.
Mhm.
And you'll feel a lot more accomplished when you just finally like do something rather than saying, oh, I want to always do this, or I want to do this, or I'm interested in this. Like, just do it. No pressure, no nothing, just do it and enjoy it and see how it kind of goes. And so now, like even with this podcast, now I'm to the point where I'm like, okay, I I know how to do this, and I know how to do this fairly effectively with like, repetition and with other people, and how to kind of structure it and how to kind of go about doing it. And like the interviews are more easy, like to kind of flow
Mm.
with them.
Yeah.
Um, and then even like when I'm doing episodes by myself, like I have like a basic idea in my mind of how I go about it. And so now I'm like, oh well, like now that I can do this, like this is sustainable. This is something that I can manage, consistently. What can I do else that's kind of creative? And so it's like how this morning I was thinking of like, oh, maybe I should get into live streaming this podcast.
Oh my
And how do
gosh.
I do that? And how do I do that with the least amount of effort, but with just a way to see, okay, how is it going to be received?
Mm.
Because in the end, with this podcast, it's all about putting the message out there and for people to be able to listen to it.
Mm.
And so, no matter what that medium looks like why not try it? And so I'm like, okay, I've got these like little like wireless mics that I can plug into my phone and just live stream straight from my phone. I'm like, oh, well, maybe next time for the next episode I can do that. And then just the audio form that is on like Spotify and Google Podcast and Apple Podcast, that would just then be the condensed form, with cut out some of the pauses, or somebody has to get up and run to the bathroom or whatever, all those little things, and
Or you
and
have to cut out inaccurate information.
yeah, or inaccurate information. Those are the little things that I do just to help keep the flow and for stuff to make sense. The first couple episodes I cut out all the like the ums and ahs, and now I'm just like, "Ah, screw it.
You
I
just
can't be
don't
bothered.
have the time to do that
Exactly.
anymore. So I'm hearing that instead of striving for perfection, it's more like striving to be done and get something out that is like good and you're proud of it, but it doesn't need to be perfect. And I think a lot of people who are really creative, no, I know psychology, that people who are really creative and artistic tend to be more perfectionistic. And
Mhm.
so, people can really get down on themselves and don't release what they are doing because it's not up to their perfectionistic standard.
Yeah.
But I'm hearing that it's, if you can get past that barrier of this isn't perfect, but it's still good,
Mhm.
that just get it out there. And,
Yeah.
you can learn from that more than just keeping whatever you've created to yourself and no one ever seeing it.
Yeah, exactly. And it's all like what's the intention behind it, and will you will you fulfill that intention by making sure that it's perfect, or will you fulfill that intention by actually just making stuff and continuing to do stuff? So like I know that with this podcast, the more that I produce it, the more that I like do it on a regular basis, the better it will become. Or I could sit here and be like, okay, I have to make sure that the room is like sound dampened and stuff like that. And like I mean, like sure you can hear like the cars driving in the background from our living room. But it's like and like the mics, they aren't always perfect. And same thing with like live streaming. It's like I'm trying to find the most basic possibility with the tools that I have right now because of my work as a videographer and the mics and stuff like that that I have for that. I'm like, what else can I use in order to make this a possibility? So it's like even with thinking, oh well, like maybe I can have a podcast with like two or three people on it, and so then it's like four of us. How do I record that in a way with just the basic things that I have? I'm like, oh well, like I've got these small little mics and these other things, and I have alternatives in place. Uh, and it's like it's not perfect. It's not, and it's not about being perfect. It's not about having the best quality of everything. It's achieving to a certain level of quality that you're content with, and emphasis on content. It doesn't have to be like you have to be ecstatic about it or something like that. And then yeah, just doing it.
Yeah. Like you want to get out quality content more than quantity, but there is a certain point that consistency is just as important or more important than being a perfectionist,
Yeah,
especially when it comes to a podcast.
yeah. Well, there's this really interesting. I can't remember where I heard it from, but it was this kind of experiment that they did in this art school. It was a photo school, and the I think it was the professor had split the class into two different groups, and one group was given the task of making the best image that was possible for that semester, and that's what they were graded off of.
Mm,
And then the other half were graded on a portfolio of images, and so he just said create as many images as you want and as possible, and create a portfolio out of it, and then that's how you're going to be graded.
mm.
And the inherent quality of image by image for those that took more images, and that's what they were graded off of their portfolio, scored higher in their grade and evaluation based off compared to the people that only had the one piece that they had to focus on.
Interesting.
And it goes back to the whole yes, it's about quality, but it's also about like quantity in the long run of the more that you do, the better you'll get at it.
Yeah, exactly. So, from a business standpoint, what are the qualities of a good creative entrepreneur?
I think a lot of it is just communication and
Like how you communicate with clients or
yeah.
like I mean, that would make the most sense now that I'm thinking about it.
But yeah, like when you get down to the nitty gritty of running a creative business, it's not necessarily about what it is that you produce or the quality that you produce it at, but it's how you communicate and how you are portrayed to potential clients.
Mm,
Because when you start running a business, there's always going to be somebody that is willing to hire you for your current quality of work. And so it comes down to then making sure that your communication helps you get the kind of clients that you want or the kind of clients that you need. So like the higher paying clients and all that kind of stuff. Um, so yeah, as like a creative business owner, you have to be more business savvy than you do creative. But at the same time, as successful entrepreneurs, and this is what we talked about with Jonathan too, is that you need to be a creative person in order to be a successful entrepreneur because you're all about problem solving.
mm.
And so you're always then solving problems for people.
I think it would be good to talk about like how you've built your business because, you're pulling back the curtain of the creative journey. So what does that look like though? Like how did you get to this point?
So here's your 3-step guide to starting your creative business.
It's
On,
probably way longer than one podcast episode, but
online course will be released this summer for $199 per month.
that's
No, I'm
how
just
it
joking.
goes,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. Um,
Get my course here.
yeah, my webinar, my free webinar.
Without giving away all your, coaching tips and tricks. But like, I think people want the practical. They want to know, how do I get to that point where I can make this an income?
Yeah, I think I mean it's kind of it's a challenge for when you like broad stroke the creative, let's call it like the creative industry, because some people and what it is that they create, it's exclusively like art oriented.
Mhm.
And so it's not the way that you approach that then is different than how you would approach, photography and videography for business brands and nonprofits, like what I do.
Correct.
Um, but for myself, like the kind of the route that I went was I first had to figure out what it was that I was actually passionate about. Like, why is it that this whole industry and like photography and videography is actually interesting to me? And when I started getting down to it, it was talking about, okay, like stories. Like I'm obsessed with stories.
Yeah, I can attest to that. It's the only books Michael has picked up to read in like our entire relationship of me knowing Michael is how to create good stories. I was shocked when he started reading them. I was like, "Oh
Right.
my goodness, you're reading a book."
Much to her disappointment, it was not fiction.
It was not fiction. That's okay. It was still
Mm,
great to know we could go to a beach and you would listen to an audiobook or read and not just feel like you're bored on the beach like you were our first year of marriage and we went to Mexico.
yeah.
You were so bored out on the beach while I'm
Like
like
I've got nothing to
I was
do.
so invested in the Maze Runner.
Yeah.
That's what I was reading at the time and you were just like so bored. So now I like that you can just chill out with a book, even if it's about storytelling on the beach.
Mm,
Beach vacations are much more appealing now, aren't they?
actually, yeah, they are 100%. Um, yeah, like for me, when it came down to, so like when I worked at the church, one of the things that I had to do was they called them like testimonial videos, and so it's like how they became a Christian and their story behind that and that their transformation period, and it really intrigued me of how to tell their story and how to capture the emotion behind it.
Mhm.
And so when I started, then like when I had quit that job and moved into trying to do something like on the side, like photography for concerts, I was like, okay, well, how does this actually translate? Because like I could just take pictures of like of people on stage and stuff like that, and it's interesting, but it's not intriguing.
Mm.
And so then I'm like, okay, what is it that I actually love doing? And I love capturing moments of emotion, moments that convey an emotion or that are
Mhm.
capturing an emotion. And that goes back to then story, because I want people to be intrigued by the things that I create and wanting to know more about, okay, what's the story behind that? What's the purpose behind that? Um, and so, yeah, so once I kind of had that thread narrowed down, I more or less kind of through a process of elimination and through a process of, okay, let's try a little bit of this and a little bit of that. Um, Figuring out what it was that I actually wanted to do and what it is that I wanted to be essentially known for as a business and as a creative. And yeah, it's really I think it's a very slow process. It's definitely
Yeah.
not a very like, oh, here we
At
go.
least for
Like,
you it was.
yeah, it's definitely not like a one and done or like a quick fix or anything like that. It's part of the creative journey of finding your own creative identity, but then also how does that translate then into doing this in like a full time capacity
I
where
mean, you
you
can correct me if I'm wrong, but when you first started this and you first like started taking photos of concerts and things like that, even though you were making money doing it, I don't think you set out with the purpose of like making that your full-time income. It's more
mm,
or less once you started getting paid and you started getting more and more concerts, you started to realize, wow, I can actually do this as my job.
yeah, someone will actually hire me for that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, from a creative side, it was just realizing that, okay, people actually see value in this
Mhm.
and what it is that I can do as an individual, and then the value that it brings their business or their venue or whatever.
Right. So how did that then translate into videography and sharing stories? Yes, pour your water. How did that translate into videos and telling stories for people? When did that come into play?
It was always something that I was like ever since I worked at the church, right? The it was I was very intrigued by it. But then I also knew that I had to have a certain level of like, production gear in order to actually make it in a way that I was happy with it. And once I started doing like the photo gigs and stuff like that, it's kind of like the same pattern that a lot of photographers go into that are interested in both. Is that once you start developing like a portfolio of photos, you get to a point where you can actually like afford to buy other gear. And then that kind of goes into, oh well, like maybe I can buy a couple things that would be very good, like photo oriented stuff, or sorry, video oriented stuff. And yeah, and once it was probably by the end of our time in Canada, so end of like 2019, I realized that, and I mean, I was behind the times, of course, but video is so much more vital to businesses and organizations now than it ever has been. And when I clued into that, I realized that there's not a lot, like in the grand scheme of things, there's not a lot of people that can do it and do it well. And so then I was like, okay, let's set out and actually creating this into a way where I'm helping businesses, brands, and organizations tell, better stories, and for the right reasons, in ways that aren't just, social media banger clips and stuff like that. Like like the
Yeah.
cliche kind of images and videos that you can kind of think of. But yeah, it's a big process. It really is. And for me, it took a long time to get to the point where I was like, oh, like really stories is like the biggest thing that I'm interested in. Um, but yeah, it's part of the process of falling in love with it. I know it sounds really cheesy, but that's really like what it is. It's when you start getting so fascinated and wrapped up into it and learning so much about it, then you start understanding or you start deciphering what it is that you love about it. And in the end, if I had to choose like one job in the creative realm of things to do now, it would be it'd be storytelling and whatever that medium would be.
Mhm.
And I think that I would be content with that. So like even if somebody like had to hire me and write a blog, like I would still be content with that because it's still creative and it's telling people stories. And so like photo and video, it's like as silly as it sounds, it's like it's not my like end all be all. And I had somebody say this to me like 2 years ago. And he was a photographer and videographer that traveled around and helped tell the stories of nonprofits and stuff like that around the world. And he said, right now, the best way to tell the stories of these different organizations is through photo and video. But that might change.
Mm.
And if that changes, then I'll change the medium. And in the end, his passion behind it was helping tell the stories of all these different things and the need to support and rally behind these different organizations.
Mm. That's good.
And I think that really inspired me because you can get so hung up on one medium as being the end all be all.
Mhm.
And in the end, for me, photo and video is just the medium that I use from a business standpoint to convey those different things for business brands and organizations.
Mhm.
And for myself as a business owner, like podcast is really my only like marketing material that I have.
Yeah.
And that's helping tell my story as a creative, as I learn and develop my skill. This is just the medium that I've chosen because it's the thing that fits me the best right now.
Yeah. That makes sense. So looking into the future then, what's a business that you're really interested in starting or working towards starting?
Um, this is something that I reached out last week to the it's the WKO here in Austria, so it's the Wirtschaftskammer, and what they are in charge of is like it's the economy chamber, uh, chamber of commerce. I think that's the English version of it.
When you speak German so much.
Yeah, but um, what I had inquired about was starting a nonprofit where essentially I would be able to fundraise money to help lower earning NGOs and individuals to help them tell their stories.
What's an NGO for those of us who do not know?
Non-government organization, I think it is. It's a
Okay,
nonprofit.
so a nonprofit.
Yeah, it's charities.
Okay, thank you.
I think NGOs are technically like cross borders.
Okay.
I think. I'm not even sure. That's why I just say nonprofits usually.
Yeah.
But yeah, so the idea behind it is that I would be able to fundraise money to be able to essentially sponsor the production of these different things and then be the one that produces it. So in one way, it's fundraising for that kind of stuff, but then also paying myself through it. And I like, yeah, they sent me back an email and said, yeah, you can't pay yourself through your NGO, which I knew like
Understandable.
it made sense. I just wanted a clarification because I'm like, if that is a possibility, then that's cool. I think there's the caveat of I could hire myself and have like a salary through it, but even that is kind of like a gray area. So I have to look into it a little bit more. But that's something that I find really interesting is that even at the end of the day, if I can't pay myself for productions like that, what I can do is I can start a nonprofit that will help cover the expenses for the production,
Mm-hmm.
excluding my salary.
Mm-hmm.
And so that would cover any gear or travel or other crew or anything like that. And it would be then to, essentially help those organizations tell their stories in a very high quality way.
Yeah.
And something that's more than just, the charity worker with their phone recording, whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, because in the end, it's like those are the organizations that are making some of the biggest differences in the world, but so many people don't know about it.
Yeah.
And when you start partnering with organizations like that, and you start realizing the value that they bring to the world, it really changes your perspective on, passion and purpose behind creativity and what it is that you produce. And like my favorite thing that I ever did was I went to Angola and helped a nonprofit there, and that still sticks out to me as one of those key defining moments of mental shift for me.
I was wondering when you were going to bring it up. Because in my mind, that's when things mostly changed for you when it came to storytelling and videography.
Yeah, Angola.
It's because I wasn't there, right?
Yeah, Danielle's still a little bit bitter about that one.
I'm so bitter you went to
I went to
Africa
Africa
without
by
me.
myself. That was great.
I still have yet to go anywhere in Africa.
In the end, it was a fantastic trip, but it taught me a lot about how I want to move forward with creative work. And yeah, after that, I said like, if I can't do anything else in the creative realm of stuff, but I just do that, like I would be happy, like helping tell their stories and figuring out the creative ways to do it. That really sticks out to me.
Yeah,
I love it. It's good.
cool. What would it look like to you to be successful in that?
In storytelling for like charities and
Yeah.
organizations and stuff like that. Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing for me would be that I can figure out a way to that I can fund my life so that I can do that.
That sounds so awful.
I know it sounds awful, but like that's the like in the end, if I, and this is what I told some people too, like when it comes to like my work as a business owner, I'm like, if all that is for is to be able to make enough money so that I can do these other things on the side for free or for a really low cost or something like that, then that's worth it to me. And so it's success to me is, yeah, like I said, like it's fun finding a way to be able to fund that in a way that is transparent. So not
Mhm.
starting not starting my own nonprofit that pays my salary, because apparently that's a no-no. I was really disappointed. I was hoping it was going to work out. Um,
It's also harder here in Austria than it is in North America to start a nonprofit
yeah,
from your experience.
yeah. There's a lot of. I mean, there's so many different like categories of it.
Mm.
And I think that's the biggest issue.
Mhm.
But yeah, the easiest way is to start a verein, and through that, I am not able to distribute the income or the money that comes in from it to the members of it, which would then be me. Um,
Mm.
yeah, so I'm working on trying to figure out how to do this a little bit better.
Mhm.
And but yeah, in the end, if I just have to like work my butt off and work for businesses and brands that can actually like more effectively afford it, so that I can fund these other things, that is what I would be stoked about. Or figuring out a way to make a side income off of something like a podcast.
Ooh.
So if you're an advertiser that's looking for for podcasting space,
Brands,
yes.
we're looking.
No, it's yeah. I mean, in the end, it's like if I can have some sort of income on the side that can help fund that kind of stuff, then I'd be stoked on that.
True. Are you ready for some listener questions?
Yeah.
Cool.
Let's get into the
What we call Yaffe. You asked for
yes,
it.
you asked for it.
Okay, so one listener asked, what constitutes creativity and can it be a learned skill?
Yeah, I mean, creativity has so many different facets, I guess, or styles or ways that it can look. But in the end, it's the ability to it's the ability to create. Um, but it's the ability to express yourself through creating something, and I think that's kind of the key defining thing for me, at least as a creative person, is how do I express myself and create something that's new or that's different or that's an expression of myself. Um, when it comes to like you said, can it be learned?
Mm-hmm. Can it be a learned skill?
I think so. I think it absolutely can be because if you like people, there's some people that have like a natural ability for it, and then it comes very easily to them. But then I think when it comes to like from a person to person basis, it is something that can be learned and developed through different things and through different pursuits. I mean, if you are not enjoying your life and you are sitting in an office for 10 hours a day, Monday to Friday, and on the weekends you just watch TV, like you're not going to feel very creative after that. And I mean, some people do that and they love it. That's fine, but um, if you're wanting to develop creativity or if you're wanting to like be a creative person, that is not what is going to move you forward. It's just like learning other things. It's like when you are learning a new skill, or if you want to like be a musician or something like that. Like I took guitar lessons for 2 semesters in college because I loved music, but I also knew that I couldn't just pick up a guitar and play it right away. Like I had to learn how to do it. Um, and so in the practice of it, you get better and better and better, and so you develop that creativity. And I think the more avenues that you go about being creative and expressing yourself, the more and more uh, success you'll find in it, just for your own personal sake. The more enjoyment that you'll find out of it, and yeah,
Mm. Can creative ideas be genuinely generated, or is it, in short, the thought process of creatives and its juxtaposition to other types of temperaments or things?
such a deep question.
Got some deep listeners.
Yeah, I know full well who asked this too. Yeah, I think creative ideas, in the way that I take it, in the way that I think about it, is it does play a role in like imagination. Um, because usually when you are creating something, you think of at least some of it beforehand. Um, and so in that sense, it is imagined, so generated. like from a creative perspective? Yeah, it's a hard question. What would you say?
Definitely. I think they can be genuinely generated because I think that at the core, we're all creative people. We all have creative abilities, and it may not be that, you're talented in music or you're talented in dance or art or things like that. But I think that there is a creativeness that comes in most things that we do. So for me, I'm more of a intellectual and I'm very logical and I have a hard time thinking of myself as a creative person. But when I get down to the core of it, even in writing papers and essays, I'm very creative in how I craft my words.
Mm,
And I'm creative in how I get ideas across. And so I think that everyone has creativeness in them.
hmm.
And if we believe that creativeness is inherently in people, then the thought process needs to be genuinely generated. Even if you don't feel like you're a creative person, there's still creativity to you.
Yeah, I think we are created for creativity. Like we are, like it's part of our DNA as humans and as individuals. And yeah, like you said, it's part of who we are. And if we believe that, then yeah, it's a genuinely generated thing, and it's just a process of self-expression and you know learning
Mm.
and growing and continuously developing.
Okay, last question for you, Michael. How do I pick a niche? And what if I like doing a lot of things?
You wrote this question, didn't you?
100%.
Yeah,
Because I always had a hard time finding a niche, even when I started a blog those many years ago.
yeah. Back when we both started to try
To
start a
blog.
vlog.
Oh man, that was so much work. And then I still love that blog posts are like, how to create passive income. One, start a blog. No, no, stop telling everyone to start a blog.
It's a challenge because you're fighting against so many different like information givers. So it's like you are just amongst the noise. So how do you stand out amongst the noise?
Hmm.
And you have to be loud. You have to have purpose, and you have to act like you have to have you know focus on it. It's not something that can just be like easily winged or wung. You can't just wing it. Like
Hmm.
you have to have if you want to make income off of it. Um, but I love this question because this is something that I struggled with, something that Danielle knows that I struggled with because it was a constant conversation when I first got started. Is that if I, and this is something I still believe, is that if you want to be able to make a decent income as a creative person, um, you have to figure out how to niche and be an expert in a certain thing. It's like for artists that like for creative artists, they almost all have their own unique style, their own unique medium, their own unique way of expressing themselves. Everybody has their own style and their own unique thing, and when you become a specialist in that sense, in that area, then you become recognized for it. But when it comes to the question of how do I pick a niche and what if you like a lot of things, a lot of it comes down to just trying different things and kind of evaluating, okay, you do one thing, do I like that? Do I not like that? It's kind of like concert photography for me. Like at first I thought that that's what I was going to do because I loved music and I loved concerts and I loved photographing at concerts and I felt like I did that well. But in the end, I was like, okay, if I want to make, a steady income off of this and something that I can enjoy and live off of, I don't know if this is the particular route that I want to go.
Hmm.
People can do it and they do it successfully and they enjoy it. But uh, I was like, okay, what part of the concert photography did I like?
Hmm.
And that goes back to the whole capturing like moments of emotion. It's like moments of emotion and meeting. And so then from there, I was like, okay, like if that's my thread that I'm kind of drawing through different stuff, then okay, let's try this kind of thing or that kind of thing. So I worked for I worked for a couple different businesses and what it was that they were doing. And then, just this constant trying and assessing. And when you kind of do that for long enough, then you get to a point where now I'm like, okay, I know what it is that I want to do and what I love, and that's stories, and that's, depicting individuals that are inspiring people for something. And so if that means that it's for, say, a brand, for a shoe company or something like that, that's the kind of content that I would want to produce. And that's the kind of work that I would want to produce. And I think in that, then yeah, you can kind of start narrowing down that niche of, or as some people say, the niche.
Oh, no, please no.
Yeah, it's the niche of, being able to do that and do that effectively and do that well. So yeah, it's a long process of just trial and temptation. I say temptation because it's like,
it's not really error.
it's trying different things. So like you're testing different things out, and then you're like, oh, maybe I might be tempted in this kind of photography or that kind of photography, or maybe that business sphere or that business sphere. Yeah, in the end, you're kind of tempted by them, and so you're just like, oh, let's try it out, let's see. But it doesn't mean that you're committing 110% of your efforts into that one area. You're trying to just figure out, okay, what are these different things that I actually enjoy? But the trick is to get started and just to try different things. And as you try and as you learn and as you develop, you figure out, what are you happy with learning? What are you happy with developing? What are you happy to be known for, to be recognized for as a creative, as an artist? And in that process and in that trajectory, you start finding your niche and your voice and your individuality in this creative world that we live in, with so many different things, so many different people. In that, then you find your niche and your, I call it purpose. Because like niche is just something that you're like, that you're really good at or known for. But as a creative, then I think it's kind of like, it ends up becoming your purpose. And that for me is telling stories and enjoying that and figuring out creative ways how to do that and the challenges that arise from that. For somebody else, it might be something completely different. But yeah, that's my purpose and that's my passion behind it. And that's why I want to do what I do.
Cool.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you, Danielle. Thank you for hosting.
Thank you, Michael, for being a guest on my podcast.
I should convince her to do her own podcast. I think that'd be really cool.
I don't think I have the time.
Not right now. Maybe eventually. Eventually I'll convince her.
Yep, Danielle's brain bites or something like that. Yeah. Who knows? But
thank you for the barrage of questions. And the that's the right word, right? The bombardment, the attack of questions.
The attack.
Yeah. One of those words.
So aggressive.
One of those words work. But yeah, I appreciate it, and I appreciate that you took the time to help me be able to express myself and to ask these questions and to just be on the podcast episode again. You're so far the only recurring guest that I've had, so should feel extra special. Yeah.
Yes. Moving up in the world.
Yeah. All that being said and done, thank you guys so much for listening and for being a part of this. I just want to encourage you, if you are listening and if this stuff does speak to you, if it does make a difference, if you do leave ratings and feedbacks on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts, and all that kind of stuff. And so the whole idea and the intent of this podcast is to get out to as many ears as possible, to be able to encourage and uplift and challenge and push forward and help people find their creative purpose and their creative passion. So doing those little things do make a difference. So by all means, I encourage you guys, please do that. It makes a difference for myself and for the show. And in the end, for everybody else that's out there that is feeling like a clueless creative. But again, thank you guys for listening, and we'll catch you in the next one. Well, that's all from us today on the Clueless Creatives Podcast. I'm your host, Mike Kvick, and I believe you deserve to thrive in your creative journey and that you don't have to settle and be another clueless creative doing this all alone. Let me know that you've listened to this episode by heading over to Instagram and shooting me a message at Mike Kvick. I would be thrilled to get to know you and hear about your creative journey. If you enjoyed listening, consider leaving me a review. It makes a huge difference. I hope you feel encouraged and empowered to take the next step in your personal creative journey. You're amazing and you deserve to have a thriving creative journey. So go be creative, inspire others, and have fun.